Thanks a million, Keir. I will prefix this by saying that I'm going to be touching on some difficult topics, some difficult history, and I won't delve too deeply. I will let people do their own research into more deeply. Also, I have a migraine. I have taken some medication, but the medication can affect my ability to retain. Here I'm demonstrating it now. It can it can affect my ability to access my words, and I am very sorry about this. It also means that I'm not in the position to host a discussion later on. But my sibling has very kindly said that they will step in. Be perfectly honest with you, if you Google me, you'll get a picture of them anyway. So obviously the universe isn't able to tell the difference between us. So in order to talk about the topic that I'm going to talk about, it's going to tie in, it actually, unbeknownst to me, is going to tie into an awful lot of what other people have talked about already. But it's to do with a recent open letter from a number of organisations, but I want to focus in on the Psychology Society of Ireland and their signatory. They're one of the signatories to this open letter. But in order to develop a neuroaffirming future, we have to understand what neuroaffirming practice is. This is a graphic from a person called Sunny Jane Wise, and this is from their work. They're excellent. I'd absolutely recommend anybody to look them up and their resources. Their book, this is an image, a graphic image of their book, We're All Neurodiverse. And they look at the neurodiversity paradigm and what it means, but also what the way our society is and how it is focused. They tie in, they bring in the social model of disability, they bring in the human rights approach, but they also have a very good resource for practitioners around neuroaffirming therapeutic tools, which is something that is really, really needed and something that's really, really very, like, a lot of the therapy that people are able to access is not neuroaffirming, and it's definitely more focused towards a neurotypical audience. Anyway, I won't go on too long about that. So as people can probably read there are a lot of steps to becoming neuroaffirming and becoming and one of them is rejecting the normativity, which ties into what some of the speakers have already referenced, in that we, even within the neurodivergent community, have a tendency to accept that there's a one way of normal and we're all diverging from it, which, is problematic in itself. Then we need to validate difference. We need to presume competence. Presuming competence is such an important part of having a neuroaffirming future. It is something that is integral to what the work that we try to do in Neuro Pride. It is something that we will advocate for and push for because it is core. It's a core principle to a neuroaffirming future. And what that means is seeing people as fully rounded, fully formed and fully autonomous human beings, regardless of whether they use verbal speech or not, regardless of whether they have an intellectual disability or not, regardless of whatever is going on for them, whatever difference is going on for them. So I just thought it was important to kind of have this visual image of what neuroaffirming practice is. I am really, really sorry that I can't, for those who might have visual impairments, that I can't read them all out. I just can't focus right at the moment. My eyesight is very, very blurry. But if you go on to Sunny Jane Wise's website, the images are there with graphic descriptions. Sorry, Eva, could you go on to the next slide, please? I'm using these slides as an aid memoir because I find it very difficult to remember things. So these are quotes from a man called Ola Ivor Lovas. And I was going to go describe who he was and then do the quotes, but actually you can tell a lot about the man by these quotes. So I thought it was really important to kind of frame what I'm going to talk about. These are not easy quotes. They are not easy to hear and they're not easy to read out. So I do apologize for this. Olav Ivor Lovas is a behaviorist. He is the man that is credited with developing ABA, working on the work of the likes of B.F. Skinner, which is operant conditioning, award and punishment is at the core of what that is. So he began working with deliberately found a cohort of children that he was like, these are perfect for what I want. He deliberately started working with non-speaking children who were already institutionalized because he wanted to prove that with using behaviorism, he could get them to talk. And so this is why he chose to work with these children. So the quote is, you see, when you start pretty much from scratch, when you work with an autistic child, you have a person in a physical sense. They have hair, a nose, and a mouth, but you're not people in the psychological sense. One way to look at it, at the job of helping autistic kids, is to see it as a matter of constructing a person. You have the raw materials, but you have to build a person. I doubt I need to tell you how dehumanizing that is and how this is core and fundamental in what underlies ABA. Even new ABA, even though we've changed it, we don't electrocute people anymore, except that they still do. This is core to what underpins ABA. Is this dehumanizing, that we're not real people? I should point out that he was specifically talking about autistic people, but ABA is used on intellectually disabled people, people with Down syndrome, and other neurodivergent people. They've expanded the business model. So this next quote is when he's talking about a young person that he worked with called Beth. Beth would get very distressed while being experimented on, is the only way to say it, and would display self-interest behavior. And she would get more and more distressed, and it would escalate and escalate. So Lovas decided that the way to stop her doing this was to hit her. I apologize, this is not easy stuff to talk about. I knew that she could inhibit it and that she would inhibit it if she knew I would hit her. So I let her know there was no question in my mind that I was going to kill her if she hit herself once more. This man, to his deathbed, thought of himself as a loving, kind person, and that he was doing this in the best interest of this child, and never once questioned how abusive he was being or how it wasn't okay. Because bear in mind, to him, this person wasn't a real human anyway. He also escalated to the point when the rewards and punishments weren't working, when the hitting wasn't working anymore, he escalated to the point of using electric shock. He electrified the floor, he would electrocute the children. Isolation or electric shock may seem harsh, but these are acts of affection for children who have spent large parts of their lives hurting themselves. Again, I am so sorry to bring this up and to talk about this. It's a very difficult topic, but I think it's really important because of the next bit that I'm going to talk about. I need to give you that historical context so you can see why, let's be honest, I'm upset by the next part. Aoife, could you go? Yeah. So it's a little bit of history. So as I've mentioned, sorry, I'm trying to make it bigger for myself because I can't see it. Nova started with a young autism program in UCLA with the task of building a person where there wasn't one before. That was basically the tagline of that program. So he worked with 19 children and he worked with them for years. And in the standard ABA model of 40 hours a week, these children did basically a full-time job. And the main children that he talked about were Beth, Billy, and Chuck. As I said, mentioned they were non-speaking children. So he would use the methods of extinction fading, reinforcers, and behave and aversives. And so he would, reward the behavior you wanted, not reward the behavior you didn't, but it would escalate. He would withhold affection. He would basically groom these children so they would want his attention and whatever, and then he would withhold it. And then if that didn't work, he would get physical. The reason I'm bringing this up is because he then took the work that he had done on autistic children and used it in what is called the Feminine Boy Project. Now, people who know their LGBTQI plus history may recognize that name. He worked with a man called George A. Rikers. And what they did was they basically took the work that they'd done on autistic children around trying to extinguish autistic behaviors, trying to change autistic behaviors so they appeared more neurotypical, and use it on children who are displaying what we would now call transgender characteristics, or at the time, feminine characteristics in male assigned children. As you can see, the piece of research is called The Treatment of Deviant Sex Role Behaviors in a Male Child. Again, I will prefix, I am not going to be talking, this is difficult to talk about, and I will be talking about this did not end well, unfortunately, for the child involved. And I apologize again. So the child involved was brought to them, and they worked with him, and they would use affection. They trained his parents to use affection and to use physical punishment if he displayed if he chose female toys, what we call considered female toys, if he showed any kind of feminine leaning interests or anything like that, he would get tokens. And as anybody who knows anything about ABA would very much recognize that token system. And at the end of the day, if his dad came home, he would check the token jar, and if there was more red than blue, the child would get hit. And unfortunately, as an adult, this level of trauma took its toll, and he unfortunately took his own life. His siblings are very adamant it was a direct result of the what he experienced as a child. This is important because when we, as autistic and neurodivergent people, talk about ABA and talk about it as abuse and talk about it, it is a form of conversion therapy. It's not. The Feminine Boy Project is recognized as one of the first sort of scientific conversion therapies for gay people or transgender people. And it's not, when we're talking about this, we're not talking about it as these things are similar. These things are kind of alike. These things are the exact same thing developed by the exact same man. And that is important. If you can go on to the next slide, please. That this is an article that came out in GCN on the 12th of July in 2024. So this is this year. And I want to be very clear. I'm delighted that they had this open letter. I think it's really, really important. And this is not to undermine that campaign and that the work that has been done. But there was a joint memorandum renouncing the damaged conversion practices, therapy practice, was published today by the College of Psychiatrists in Ireland, the Psychological Society of Ireland, and the Irish Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. That they signed the memorandum to say that conversion therapy practices basically they're condemning conversion therapy practices, and they're calling on the government to bring in a ban that people have been working for a very long time and doing sterling work on this. The reason I'm bringing this up, and as I said, this is really important and it is fantastic. However, their language that they used was that conversion therapy is used on LGBTQIA+ to inherently change who they are and that is wrong. But it specifically and only mentions LGBTQIA+ and conversion therapy being used. It does not mention neurodivergent people. It does not mention anything like that. And this is where intersectionality is important. This is where working with other organizations is important. We need pride organizations. We need the LGBTQI+ community to advocate and work to change the language of the legislation, to leave a gateway for us, to not just limit it to LGBTQIA+, but to say that conversion therapies and behavioral interventions that seek to change people are not okay. And therefore, then we have a window, then we have an opportunity to use this legislation to then fight for ourselves. It's really, really important, especially given the huge overlap between the communities. If you could go on to the next slide, please, Eva. And I'm apologizing that I'm delaying everybody. So this is why I wanted to bring this up. Sorry, the previous slide, please, Eva. The Psychology Society of Ireland, while condemning conversion therapy, this is awful, it's wrong, we shouldn't do this to people, changing people, who people are is fundamentally wrong, have a division of behaviour analysts as part of their organisation. And these behavioural analysts have, on multiple occasions in the past year, contacted the DAL, contacted the Disability Matters Committee to argue why what they're doing is different and it's not the same, and people who try to say it is are misinformed and are just angry autistics and shouldn't be talking about it. So they claim to promote and maintain official and professional standards among behavioural analysis. I don't know how you can say that you have ethics when you're fundamentally trying to change who autistic people are. And again, people will say, oh, but new ABA doesn't do that, blah, blah, blah. One of their aims on their own blurb about who they are is more appropriate or socially acceptable behaviours. It provides a framework for improving socially significant behaviours such as social skills, independent skills, communication, and decreasing challenging behaviours. So in other words, changing who autistic people are. I think this is really important that we push back against the Psychology Society of Ireland and be like, on one hand, you're saying conversion practices are wrong, and on the other hand, you have a subdivision of behavioural analysis. Those two things can't exist. You cannot say, especially given the history of conversion therapy, especially given that it was invented by the same man. Do not get me wrong, conversion therapy happened, or I keep on saying therapy, it's not therapy. Conversion practices exist before that. So yes, I just wanted to bring attention to it.